Hi everybody! Hope that you are all doing fine and that you are following our YouTube channel. Today we will study how to master debugging. The debugging process can be tiresome, and also a lot of developers neglect the debugging process, but in my opinion this is one of the most powerful tools in any developer arsenal. We'll start with the agenda of today. First we'll go over breakpoints, then we'll add some watch and we'll talk about variables during the debug process. We'll dive deep into the debugging process. We'll study how to evaluate an expression, how to change values during runtime, and what are some common pitfalls that we should all avoid. Breakpoints are the basic building blocks of any debugging process. I demonstrate the debugging process using IntelliJ. If you're using PyCharm, if you're writing in Python, it should be identical because it's the same company that developed both of those IDEs. If you're using Eclipse or any other IDE, it should be fairly similar. I'll start with a project that we have developed during our From Zero to Selenium for Beginners sessions. If you haven't watched these videos, please click on the link down below. So as you can see here, I have a test which should log in to a Gmail with a valid login. In IntelliJ, whenever you want to add a breakpoint, you just need to click next to the line number. Of course, there is no meaning to add a breakpoint here, so I can't do it. You can see here that IntelliJ doesn't allow that. But if I'll press here, now I have a breakpoint. You see that now the line is painted in red, and I have the red dot here. If I want to remove it, I just need to re-click it. What do you think would happen if I'll click right here? Let's start by finding out. We'll start by, instead of run, we'll choose debug. Now the software was executed, and you can see here that we stopped on line number 21 because this is the first breakpoint that our code encountered. So I'll stop the run. And as you can see, you can either put several breakpoints. Let's say that I want to stop here and then I will want to jump to this line. So everything in between would be executed with no breakpoints. And then I will stop at line 33. One important thing to remember that we can also add breakpoints inside other methods. Here you can see the constructor of the Gmail sign-in page. If I'll head over to the constructor and I will add a breakpoint here. So let's go back one second. Yeah. So here I will stop at line 21. I will continue executing my code, but when line 26 would be executed, it will call the Gmail sign-in page, and since I've added the breakpoint here, it will stop. We'll see it in a second. If you are not sure where are all of the breakpoints that you've added, when they are located, you can head over to Run, and here you have the View Breakpoints. You can also use the shortcut. In my case, it's Mac and it's Shift Command F8. So you can see the list of all the breakpoints here. You can add some, you can remove some. Those are breakpoints that I had previously. You can see that we have a hollow dot, and here we have a full dot. And you can see here that whenever I press the checkbox, it became a whole circle. Let's remove this one. You can see now it was removed, and I'll remove all the previous ones. So currently I have 3 breakpoints. 2 of them are located here in the Gmail sign-in page test, and the other one is located in the Gmail sign-in page. You can see also that you can add some extra info to each of the breakpoints. You can suspend if you can choose a specific thread regarding this breakpoint. You can have some conditions, you can log it, and you can have all of the other stuff. We won't go over all of this, but I do encourage you to play around with that and to see if you encounter something new. If you have succeeded in doing something cool with your breakpoint, please share it down in the comment section down below and we can discuss it together. So now, after we have our breakpoints, now let's go over the debugging process. Now I have this test and I'll press the debug button. And you can see here that the code has stopped right here. Currently, I don't have any variable, but I can also add some variable to watch. You can see here that I have the result variable. And you can see here that it didn't find any local variable named result. I want to show you something. I will just continue at the execution, then we'll go back to it. Now I've stopped in line number 33. You can see here that we had this variable named result. Because we have those glasses here, you can see that I've added a watch to this variable. That way, whenever you add a new watch, you can see here by pressing the new watch, and then you can see that I can add any variable that I want. You can start following this variable during the code execution. Sometimes it will be defined, sometimes its value might be changed, so it's very useful to add it. The other variables here are variables that are occurring during the execution. Those are automatic watches. You can see here, for instance, that this represents the instance of this class. The report is the extent report object that I declared in line 21. The spark was declared on line 22, and the test was declared here in line 24. Also, I've initialized another object in line 26, and this is represented here. And also the result, this is the automatic result because it was defined here in line number 28. It's the same as this one. So this is the variable sections. By the way, you can ask yourself why the username field is not defined here. You can see here we cannot find the local variable username field. In order to solve this mystery, I will solve it for you guys. Let's go back to the Gmail sign-in page. And since we had this breakpoint here, our code stopped in this class in line number 23. And you can see this class has a member called username field. It was defined, and then I skipped it, and it was still here in the variable list. By the way, if you don't see the list, you should look here. Maybe your debug window is unopened. You need to open it here. And also, maybe it was pointed to the console. So if you don't see it, please click the debug. Now, let's go to the core of this thing. I'll rerun it. Now we've stopped here in line number 21. We have several options. The first one is step over, or F8. you can use it with a keyboard. It's very useful whenever you debug your code to use the keyboard shortcut. So step over will lead me to the next line. Step into. If I'll step into, it will go to this declaration, the extent report. It will go inside the method, or in this case the constructor that it's calling. Whenever choosing for step into, you can choose sometimes whenever you initialize an object, the constructor is also initializing another object. So if you want to force step into, you can choose which one of them you want to force step into. But we won't deal with that. I think it's less useful. Step out is whenever you dive deep into the step into and you want to go out to the one that was calling this method, you need to use the step out. The drop frame is very useful, but you should only use it for simple variables, because if you're doing, for instance, a variable that deletes something from the database, or you initialize an object and you change one of its fields, the drop frame won't let you go back because it's something that cannot be undone. So if you're doing like some calculation or using simple variables, you can use the drop frame to go back and you can rerun it again. And the run to cursor is very useful because you can move your cursor. You can see here. Now my cursor here is on line number 23. And if I'll click this one, it will execute the code until it will reach my cursor. Let's try to drop the frame. Now you can see that we have, this is this object, the Gmail sign-in test class. The report was declared in line number 21. The spark on 22. Now we're here on line number 23. Let's try to drop the frame. Yeah. And we got an error. Like I told you, because we've initialized those variables. Another useful tool you can find here. If you click resume program, so everything will be executed until our code will bump in the next breakpoint. If it won't have any breakpoint, let's say I will remove that. By the way, you can remove and add breakpoints while you're executing. You can see here. It does work, and it works great. So you can do it. If you have some problem in reaching a breakpoint because of something that was added after compilation, you won't have this V, you would have an X. But you can see that I can add and remove as many breakpoints as I'd like. So if I'll click continue, my code will be executed. You don't see the actual code because it's been executed in the second screen. And now I've stopped here. So this is the continue. Let's try on stepping over. Now I'll step over. I expect that the code will stop here in line number 36. So I'll step over. And now we have this Gmail sign-in page, insert password. Let's say that this is the correct password. I'll click step into. And now I'm inside this method, which is called insert password, under the Gmail sign-in page. And also you can see here that I have the Selenium 1, 2, 3, 4. This is like a preview of the value that I have here in the variable. I can also mouse over it and I have this option. You can see the type of the variable and everything. And also I can see it here in my variable pane. Let's also step into. If I'll step into here, what do you think would happen? Because this one is a method of Selenium, it's not something that I've wrote. So I'll step into this one. And now I'm inside send keys of Selenium. You can also debug that. So you can step over and you can go inside this loop and everything. And if you want to go back, so you'll step out of this one. And we've got back to our insert password, which is a method that we've wrote, not something of Selenium. Now I'll step out again, and I'm here again in the Gmail sign in tests. And then we can step over, and in the end, if I don't want to step into or step over any other of those other lines of code, I can just click resume program, and since I don't have any other breakpoint, everything will just continue executing, and this test would fail because I've inserted the wrong password. So we have a timeout because it tried to locate an element and it wasn't successful. Another useful tool that you have in IntelliJ, I found some similarities in stuff that you can find in Eclipse or Visual Studio, but I do believe that the evaluate expression of IntelliJ is the best that you can find. So let's try to execute our code again. And you see I stepped over all of the lines. Now I'm in line number 28. I still haven't executed this, and I still doesn't have the result in my hand. So let's say that I want to execute this code without affecting the results. I just want to, let's say, a sneak peek to see what would happen if I will execute it. So let's mark it, and we can do one of two things. Either we can click here the evaluate expression. We also have the options F8 in Mac, and we can right click on it and choose from this menu the evaluate expression. Now everything was copied, and I need to click evaluate. Now I will get the result of this one. The result is true. By the way, you can play with that. Just because I've copied this one, it doesn't mean that I cannot do other stuff. So if I'll click the dot, I have all the options that I have in the Gmail sign-in page. Let's try to choose this method, the wait for password field. And let's try to evaluate. Now we're trying to evaluate. And you can see here that the method threw an exception. Because we tried to wait for something that wasn't really here, we can have the message and everything. But the cool thing about the evaluate expression, that nothing was affected in my code. So you can play with that, and you can see what is happening. Of course, that if we'll go back to the original expression, the insert username, I will show you my second screen. So you can see here that this value was already inserted. You can see here. So if I'll try to run it again, you can see that it inserted the value just again. So if you're evaluating an expression and it does some kind of a print to the screen, and it does really happen. So in the memory, it won't change anything because this value of the result wasn't even defined yet. So here I can just refer to the insert username. So how can I get out of this? Let's go to this method. I will put a breakpoint here. And just as a reminder, you can see the screen has two of these. So here I can see that this web element would be defined. So it was defined. You can see here it's still like this. And what I can do is to get this variable that was defined here, to click on it, evaluate expression, and since it's a web element, I can ask it to clear. and it was cleared. Now I can continue executing my code. I will remove the breakpoint, and now the code was executed and the result got a return of true value. So evaluate expression is a very powerful tool. I do encourage you to use it as much as you can. Another cool thing that you can do while executing your code, let's go back for a second. Let's say that this line would be executed, the result, and I want to test what would happen if I'll get a false value. And since we all know that this will return a true value, so let's try and see what would happen. So I will continue. Now I expect to stop at line number 29. You can see that the result value here is true. If I'll mark this variable and click evaluate expression, I can change the value because I'm now assigning by using the equality mark. I can say this one equals false. Then I can evaluate, and you can see that the real value was changed to false. I've changed it during execution. In that way, I can test what would happen if this value was false, because every time I ran the program, everything was correct. So now the assertion should fail. Let's go over the assertion and we can continue executing. Now you can see here that the insert username field has failed. It was expected to be true, but it was false. By the way, you can play with that as much as you would like. Let's try to do something even more sophisticated. Let's go to the insert text method, which is under our base page. I remind you again, if you haven't watched the lectures of the From Zero to Selenium for beginners, you can find all of this code over there. So I will stop here in the base page. Let's run it. I will continue in order to get to this method. Now you can see here that I have my web element which represent this username field, this one. And then I have that text to insert. The text to insert is from 0 to selenium at gmail.com. Now let's say that I step over it. I will send the keys. Now I'm trying to get the text after. And the text after, you can see here that the text after is identical to this one. So let's do some manipulation. Let's say that the text after equals almost the same one. Copy value. And let's say it equals gmail.coil instead of com. Now, though, and also you see that I'm going to assign this value to this variable. Let's close it. Now you can see those two values are not identical, and since I'm returning the comparison which equals between this one and this one, I will get a false value. So now the result, you can see here that the result is false, just because I've played with it. It's very useful whenever you want to debug your code and while executing you want to change some values. It will be very useful to use this one. Of course, this test now will fail. One of the main pitfalls that you have while executing a code is the wait fields. You can see here that I've added the wait password field while I was writing this test. Because whenever I click something in Gmail, let's say, let's go back. You can see here that the password field doesn't appear instantly. So because I debugged the code correctly, I came to the conclusion that I need wait for password field because I need this one to appear before I continue. Whenever I click this one, I need the password field to appear. If it doesn't appear yet, I can't click on it. So if I'll comment out this line of code and I will try, let's do it without debug, and I will try to run it. You see here that no such element, when I try to insert the password, I got this error because there wasn't an element like that because I wanted to have the wait for password field. So if I was debugging, by the way, and I had this breakpoint here, no, I have this one as well. Let's remove this breakpoint and I will continue. Now you can see here that my code has stopped and the password field was loaded. Of course, that if I'll try to step over it now, see, it was successful. I haven't got this exception. What I'm trying to say, that a lot of times, especially when not including waits, some tests would pass while debugging, and then you'll be happy. You will say that your test is perfect and nothing would fail in because you've tested all the fields. And then you'll find out that in the real world, whenever you execute it, and there are some, let's say, network issues, and the fields are taking more time to load, your test would fail. So this is the most common pitfall when using debug. You should always execute your code without any breakpoints after that. Another pitfall is that you can change some values, especially whenever you saw before that I've changed the value using a valid expression. Sometimes you change values that are coming from let's say an API, and you can put another value, you can delete a value. And also whenever you try to read or write to a database, whenever you use this evaluate expression and you use something that is external to your program, you might change it as well. So you should be careful whenever using the evaluate expression and changing values while running. That's all for today, guys. I hope that you've enjoyed. I really enjoyed making this lecture for you. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do it now. And also please share your thoughts. If you have any suggestion or you want to ask any kind of question, please do it in the comments section down below. And we'll meet again soon.